Hello, we are Team 2 and we will present Part 2 of What is Linguistics. The black box problem describes a situation where we cannot directly observe what's happening inside a system. Instead, we only have access to the observable inputs that go into the system and the outputs that come out of it. Our job is to figure out what's happening inside based solely on these inputs and outputs. In the case of human language, the human mind works like a black box. We cannot look inside someone's brain to see how language is processed or learned. What we can observe is the language input, the speech that children hear as they grow up, and the language output, the sentences, words, and expressions they produce later on. Linguists carefully study these patterns of input and output to understand how the human mind develops and uses language. By doing so, they aim to uncover the hidden mental rules and mechanisms that allow us to speak and understand complex languages. This process is challenging because the internal system, the mind, remains invisible. But through systematic observation and analysis, linguists try to build theories that explain how language works inside us.
Art called the talking analogy. When you go to a store, you may see dolls that can talk when you pull a string on their back or press a button on their stomach. In this part, human language mechanisms are compared to these talking dolls. 어떻게 해야 되지? 그냥 해요. Now you have to find out how this talking doll works. But there is one rule. You cannot open the doll. You must figure out its mechanism only by observing external factors. By observing, you can discover some facts. The language mechanism does not use batteries or a power cord. The doll can say 10 fixed sentences randomly. The sentences the doll speaks are always the same. If you put the doll in water, its mechanism will be damaged. The doll always starts a sentence from the beginning, never from the middle. The language mechanism is about the size of a tennis ball and it is likely located in the stomach. In the same way, scientists study how human language works by observing external factors and making guesses.
And I'm going to briefly deduct, which means to figure out what's exactly inside the box by using example of a doll. I bet everyone knows that the doll produces a very limited range of utterances and again, which means sound, and that system is pre-designed, not constructed online. To provide some additional explanation, I've prepared a visualized version of the doll's utterance mechanism. So basically, let's presume that the total capacity of the doll's utterance is 4 phrases. If the doll reaches its limits of utterance, it will then go back to the beginning and will likely to say the phrase number 1, which can then lead us to make a hypothesis that this doll has a repetitive system.
And from now on, I will explain what's unlikely to be. This passage discusses the difference between how a talking doll and a human produces language. First, it states that it is unlikely that a doll forms sentences by combining smaller parts in real time. Instead, dolls store complete periods and play them back when activated. On the other hand, figuring out how humans produce language is much more complex. Unlike dolls, humans do not store full sentences in their memories. Instead, we create sentences as we speak by combining smaller units, such as words and grammar rules. This allows us to produce an enormous variety of utterances without repeating them exactly. This suggests that the human brain contains a much more advanced and sophisticated language mechanism than a simple playback system. The study of linguistic data, what we hear and say, helps researchers understand how this complex system works.
The section I'm covering is part of deducing what's inside the box from the input. It explains that when solving a black box problem, we should analyze both input and output data rather than relying only on the output. When working with a black box problem, we don't just look at the output like the speech produced by talking dolls or humans. We also need to consider what information was initially fed into the system. By analyzing this input, we can often infer what kind of mechanism is inside the black box. In conclusion, both input and output play a crucial role in understanding the internal workings of a black box. By focusing on the input, we can make logical deductions about how the system functions.
This page explains how we can infer an unseen mechanism through observation. It uses the example of a talking doll to illustrate this idea. At first, it may seem like the doll is learning to speak on its own. However, upon closer examination, we can see that a person records their voice and the doll simply plays it back. This suggests that the doll contains some kind of storage and playback device, such as a disc or a tape player. Even though we cannot directly see the internal mechanism of the doll, we can still make logical conclusions based on how it acquires and reproduces language. This principle applies not only to dolls but also to many other complex systems. By carefully observing inputs and outputs, we can gain insight into the hidden process behind them. In conclusion, this passage highlights the importance of observation as a tool for understanding hidden mechanisms. Even when we cannot directly examine something, we can still figure out how it works by analyzing its behavior.